I know that overall in the city, you were talking about a small number of people, something like 8% that were there of the 1.2 million people who work in the city who were there over the summer. What are you seeing right now on Wall Street? What are the big banks doing? What are the hedge funds doing?
Yeah, so I think it breaks down, at least roughly speaking, into a couple of different camps, Becky. So I think in large part, the banks want to get people back. I mean, there are exceptions, but JP Morgan, to a slightly lesser extent, Goldman Sachs, and others have started bringing people back, and they're embracing this kind of staggered, you work 1 week on, you work 1 week off strategy, because the capacity in their offices, now that they're outfitted for social distancing, really won't allow more than that. But JP Morgan was out there asking MDs in its markets division to all come in unless they had a compelling health or other reason why they couldn't. And Goldman Sachs has been a little more decentralized in their approach. And they've said, you know, they want to be flexible, but basically they also want people in. And in recent calls with investment bankers, for example, they've said, you know, you're expected to be back starting October 5th. Citigroup, Morgan Stanley taking slightly more mixed approaches with a little more embedded flexibility. Deutsche Bank telling people they can actually stay home if they want to until 2021. On the hedge fund side, I think you're seeing a lot more people avoid the office entirely. Pershing Square, for example, Bill Ackman's office, totally empty. People are barred from coming into the office. And you see that in large part in that hedge fund world where perhaps people are more seasoned. It's not as much of the apprenticeship kind of culture of a bank where you have thousands of starting analysts coming in every fall. And the idea is that they need to be trained and mentored. You tend to get a slightly more experienced worker at a hedge fund. And frankly, hedge funds tend to be more affluent and they can afford to sort of replicate the entire workstation that somebody might have at the office in their homes.
Yeah, and they're smaller too. It's probably easier to manage a culture of 20 to 30 people versus thousands of people that you're trying to deal with too.
Yeah, absolutely right. And you actually probably have the time and the ability to kind of talk to individuals about their concerns. You know, one interesting guy I interviewed is Jason Mudrick, who specializes in distressed credit. So as you can imagine, it's been an extremely busy year for him. I mean, he said typically he might work at 10 new investment opportunities at a given time. This spring and summer, he was looking at 300 at a time. So Jason's view was, I'm not going to close the office. He continued to come in from March 13th on, at times with just one analyst at his side, you know, theoretically speaking. I think they were socially distanced, but, you know, he mandatorily had everybody come back after Labor Day. And his view literally is the data in New York supports a return to office. The number of cases is quite low. And I feel like a lot of my hedge fund colleagues who are staying away just want to extend their Hampton summer vacation.
Yeah, I wonder if we're reaching a point where, not just on Wall Street, but other bosses too. We had Barry Diller on yesterday, and he said he thinks you're going to have to force people to come back. He thinks it's important that people come back to work. He says they've offered people voluntarily to come back, and nobody shows up. Do you get the sense that this is a situation that is kind of changing at this point, and CEOs, corporate leaders who were in favor of people working from home and keeping things safe have lost their patience with this?
I think it's a mix, Becky. I think that there are companies that have CEOs who want people back, and they're going to sort of set that tone. You know, Jamie Dimon using strong language recently at a virtual summit saying, you know, look, we really have to think about this stay-at-home situation. It can be really isolating for people over time. You know, we could see overdoses and suicides as a result of this if it goes on too long. You know, on the other side, you have somebody like Mike Corbett of Citigroup, who has been near Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in a house he has there this entire time, has not come back yet. He is apparently coming back in the coming weeks. But, you know, at Citi, they've made, I think, an almost entirely volunteer situation where they've surveyed employees. If they want to come back, they can. And as it turns out, 30% of their New York area workforce wants to come back and sort of is trickling back. And they expect to be at that level by October 5th. There's also this middle category, though, where people are just, they may not have a pre-existing condition or even a child care concern, which, as you and I both know, Becky, parents of young children, the school return has been shambolic and very difficult for parents to manage these different schedules and distance learning and so on. But even apart from those specific issues, there's a younger cohort of workers at Goldman Sachs and other places who are saying, you know what, we don't want to be pressured to come back. We may have a lot of sort of hard to define or very personal reasons as to why we have anxiety or we're uncomfortable, and we don't want to have to talk to HR about that. And of course, it makes it difficult for a company because if not HR or perhaps a staff physician or nurse, how do you really handle those concerns in an appropriate way and evaluate them? But these are the types of new issues that are coming up and are very tricky to deal with, because the last thing you want to do is alienate your people and have them feel that the culture is not supportive. But on the other hand, if you're one who feels strongly about bringing people back in for various reasons, you have to have some sort of process and some sort of way to evaluate individual issues.